So recently I read a book called Svensk slav in Morocco, a Swedish slave in Morocco. And it was written by Marcus Berg, who was the captain, and he was captured in 1754 on his way to Italy. And he was set free 2 years after that, which was a good deal for him. A lucky thing, because people spent their whole lives there, and many families came there, I mean forcefully of course, taken by pirates and separated, and just imagine the misery. This happened during the Barbary slave trade, which was done by the North African countries, or it was done in the region which is now part of the countries Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, Algeria, and so on. They were nominally under the Ottoman Empire, but they were very autonomous. They had various sultans and the brothers of them who claimed the throne. They had indigenous tribes who fought against one another and against the sultan. So it was a very chaotic, backwards place to be compared to Europe at the time, which is very well portrayed in this book, and also in the other books which were written by people from Europe who either worked there or were imprisoned there, and so on. So even if this is a short book, it took some time to read because there are so many interesting digressions to be made. Marcus Berg describes the environment which he was slave in. Like, they lived in a big rectangular building, and every nation had its quarters. Scandinavians had their own quarters because they were few compared to the Italians, French, Spanish and Englishmen and so on. And they had their own justice, or a representative who handled justice issues, which was a better thing than having a Moor coming and cutting the head off somebody randomly as a punishment. And the sultan that Marcus Berg was under was totally inhuman. The things he did are just I don't want to mention them, but so he was a very sick man. And I did a blog post on this book, which is about 11 PDF pages, but there's a good description there by him on the sultan and the psychology of him, and the psychology of the people who are submitted to him, and why they did that. I looked up his name at the online royal newspaper archive, and I found just like 3 mentions. 3 were from ship lists. 1 was the actual notice of the ship being taken by pirates, and the last one from 1761 was his obituary when he died. So when he returned, his wife had died, his daughter has grown up with another family, luckily, so she was all right. He remarried, but he lived just 5 years after that. Kind of a sad life and with lots of hardships, but I like the way he wrote about it. He seemed to have been, upright in whatever happened. And another thing is the way the slaves were freed. Mostly it happened in groups, so money had to be collected from their states, the churches, maybe their home village, friends. So all money was gathered, and say like 50 to 100 slaves were freed at the same time, and the money had to pass a long way, get exchanged for rifles, animals, silver or something, and so on. In other cases, the Catholics had a better time, because there were order of monks who went around the area of northern Africa and bought off slaves. But the Protestants from Central and Northern Europe had a harder time also with the distance and the correspondency. And regarding the Barbary slave trade back in the days, it could have been stopped very easily. The naval forces of Southern Europe could have easily just eliminated the problem. However, for some time, some countries, kingdoms were okay with it, because England didn't really mind having pirates attacking Spain and Spanish vessels and so on, until it kind of grew into a bigger problem. I mentioned a very, very inhumane and evil sultan which Marcus Berry was under. His son who took over, he was kind of softer and a bit more progressive, but you had to be evil. I mean, you couldn't just become too soft. But compared to his father, he was much softer, and he recognized the USA as a country. Morocco was the first country to recognize the USA, because USA had begun to trade in the region, and they wanted to have negotiation and deals made with the kingdoms and countries of that time. So they needed recognition. So Morocco was actually the first country to recognize USA. And USA was involved in the two Barbary Wars. Even Sweden had a small role there. And that didn't end it, really, because it wasn't a full-scale attack against the region. But it did sort of make its decline, and after a while Spain and France invaded northern Africa, like Algeria and Morocco. Spain went to Morocco. However, it took like Sweden until 1845 until they paid the last kind of bribe or gift for somebody down there to, you know, spare the lives and of their ship crews and so on. So it took some time. There was never a clear cut of when it ended. My intention with this video was not as much as to say like go and read this book, because it's in Swedish, it's hard to get. I got this one from Bokbörsen, Swedish secondhand bookshop online. Some books